Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin the program today in Chad, where the military has announced that elections will be held in 18 months' time, following the sudden death of President Idriss Deby. The government has been dissolved, and Mr. Deby's 37-year-old son, Mohamed Kaka, a four-star general, has been named interim president.
Army spokesman Azim Agouana announced the death of Chadian President Idriss Deby in a broadcast on state television. Surrounded by a group of military officers he referred to as the National Council of Transition. The government and parliament have been dissolved, and a military council, headed by General Mohamed Idriss Deby Itno, the son of the deceased Chadian leader, will govern for the next 18 months. 68-year-old President Deby is said to have died from injuries sustained while visiting troops on the front line of a fight against northern rebels. President Deby, one of Africa's longest ruling leaders, came to power in a rebellion in 1990. On Monday, provisional results from the election on April the 11th projected he would win a sixth term in office with nearly 80% of the vote. The vote was boycotted by opposition leaders. At a planned celebration in the capital, in N'Djamena, supporters waited for the president to deliver a victory speech, but his party said he had instead gone to visit Chadian soldiers battling rebels from a group calling itself FACT, the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, who had launched a major incursion into the north of the country on election day. The president had in the past joined the country's soldiers in the front line of the fight against Boko Haram terrorists. Mr. Deby was a long-time ally of France and other Western powers in the battle against jihadist groups in the Sahel region of Africa. In 2014, following the abduction of 223 schoolgirls in northeastern Nigeria, at a security summit in Paris, heads of state of Cameroon, Niger, Chad, Benin and Nigeria met to discuss a medium to long-term plan on sharing surveillance information, intelligence and military resources in the fight against Boko Haram. Taking a hard stance, President Idriss Deby declared that it would be total war. And just last month, he was in Nigeria to visit President Muhammadu Buhari, where they deliberated on sub-regional issues, including security challenges occasioned by the activities of Boko Haram.
This issue of the multinational joint task force, that the situation where it is only able to carry out one operation a year makes things very difficult, and the task of defeating Boko Haram more difficult. But with the new security apparatus that has been put in place with the new chiefs of staff, and not only in Nigeria, the security chiefs, but even on the multinational joint task force itself, which also has new leadership, that we're hopeful now that with new strategies and new dynamism, that we'll be able to address definitively the issue of Boko Haram.
However, there has been growing unhappiness over his government's management of Chad's oil resources. During the election, he campaigned on a platform of bringing peace and security to the region. Well, security analyst David Otto joins us now for more on this. Thank you, David, for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Well, many in Chad see Idriss Deby as a hero, lauded for his bravery, going to the front lines and as a result, this time dying for his country. What do you think about this? Do you think his death could have been avoided?
President Idriss Deby, now of late, had made it very clear in a video that has been circulated online that it is not bravery nor courage that takes a president, a commander-in-chief to go on the front line, that it only takes somebody who wants to see the stability of his country to go on the front line and make sure that the country is not destabilized as a result. He had vowed in that same video that even if it means dying in the front line, then he would do so if it is to protect the stability of Chad. And this is what is alleged to have happened, that he was killed in the front line while trying to defend the stability of Chad by rebel forces that came from Libya, calling themselves the FACT movement, which is the Front for Change and Concord in Chad.
Well, we know this has always been his strategy, being on the front lines in the war against insurgents. Would you say this produced better results?
Of course, as you rightly mentioned, we've seen President Idriss Deby now of late on the front line, especially as recently as you mentioned, during the Operation Boma Wrath, when jihadists linked to the Islamic State and Boko Haram attacked some of the Chadian soldiers in the islands of Boma. He was very much on the front line and directing and commanding, his forces. Now, I don't know if, this is a wise move or this was a wise strategy by Idriss Deby, but, I would certainly say it wasn't, because it eventually led to his demise, as it has been alleged. So I think, what is important is for a commander-in-chief to trust his commanders, to make sure that his generals have the ability to go on the war front and produce results, rather than himself going to the war front. Now, what has happened now is that the country is in chaos. So I think, this is, was a good strategy for him at the time. But, the ripple effect, is not looking very good.
Yeah, so just like you have mentioned, this is indeed a huge blow to the nation. But what impact do you think this would now have, the ripple effects you were talking about, and even how his death reflects on the fight against insurgency in West Africa?
There are two things that have happened in Chad, and we're just talking about the death of Idriss Deby. What we've also seen is that there has been something that looks more or less like a coup d'etat. The Chadian constitution clearly states that in the event that the president, dies or is incapacitated, it is the Speaker of the National Assembly that is supposed to take over from the president. Now, what we've seen is that the military has set up a military council and appointed the son of Idriss Deby as the interim president. So we've got the military regime in place, and that is the immediate impact, of the demise of Idriss Deby, and that will also have a much ripple effect, not just on the political instability that Chad will face or that Chad is facing, but it's also going to have a ripple effect on the region itself. Idriss Deby, as you rightly mentioned, was a strong man. He was seen as one of the bedrocks that held the Sahel and also the Lake Chad Basin, in some level of stability. Because remember, Chad is one of the countries that was both in the G5 Sahel coalition and also in the multinational joint task force. So the absence of Idriss Deby will have a much bigger impact, especially with Libya being very unstable. So countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger will have to really sit tight and come up with a strategy to deal with the instability that was coming from Chad, or that Chad used to cushion. But also, I think it's important for our audience to know that whoever is going to take over from Idriss Deby will have a huge task, because he was a very strong man and has been there, as you rightly said, since 1990.
All right, and thank you so much, David Otto, security analyst. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Well, let's now go ahead to discuss the political effects of Chadian President Idriss Deby's death. The military has announced the date for elections in 18 months' time. They've also dissolved the government and they've installed Mr. Deby's 37-year-old son, Mohamed Kaka, who's a four-star general, as interim president. However, analysts are saying this is unconstitutional, as Article 70 of Chad's constitution states that in the event of the death of one of the two leading candidates in an election, a fresh election should be held. And according to Article 81, in the event of the death of the president, or if the president is indisposed, the president of the National Assembly should take office and fresh elections should be held between 45 and 90 days of the vacancy. We'll try to have more on the political effects of what has happened in Chad. But moving on to other stories, the United Nations Refugee Agency says more than 2,000 refugees from the Central African Republic have crossed into Chad in the past week following violence in their country. The refugees arrive in after fleeing clashes between government forces and rebels in northern CAR face difficulties securing food, water and also shelter in Chad. The agency says its ability to provide the refugees' basic needs is severely constrained by inadequate funding, with a third of the country's population being affected by country's instability. Now, CAR has been plagued by armed clashes between the rebel coalition led by former President Francois Bozize and the National Army supported by the UN mission there, MINUSCA, and also Russian military companies. France has deplored the death of Idriss Deby and taken note of the creation of an interim military body, urging a quick return to civilian rule and a peaceful transition. President Emmanuel Macron of France, his office released a statement a while ago saying France has lost a brave friend. He says France expresses its strong attachments to Chad's stability and territorial integrity. Well, joining us now for more on the political implications of his death is African Affairs analyst Lester Wilcox. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, what are your thoughts on the impact this could have on the political situation in the country? Barely 24 hours after the announcement of Mr. Deby's re-election, we are met with the shocking news of his death.
It's quite sad. I want to send my condolences to the people of Chad, losing a long-term leader. I think in the last years or so, the only face that has been known in Chadian governance structure is Idriss Deby. He took over from Hussein Hebri in the coup, and since then he has held forth in the in the Central African country called Chad. He has done quite a bit. He has contended with a lot of opposition and enemies, a lot of what I would call insurgency and all whatnot. And it's unfortunate that he has to meet his death in this way. So it's quite shocking that a leader of that magnitude should go in that way. It throws up the frontier open now for a new political squabble. Remember, he has held on to power all these years. I can't, if I might count, I think it's well over 20 years he's held on to power in Chad since taking over from the previous president in a coup that he took over from. So he has been there for well over 20 years, and so there will be a new political squabble right now as to who will replace him. Whatever interim arrangement is happening, maybe outside the constitution, because the constitution of Chad recognizes the fact that in his absence, the Speaker of Parliament will take over. So whatever interim arrangement is being made now is also trying to worsen the political gap in the country. As a matter of fact, having just won an election and being killed means there's a lot of internal forces that are opposed to him. And it's not really enemy fire that will have killed him, but internal forces that those who has been pained or who has issues to grasp with his continuous stay in power.
Well, the the military has actually installed his son to be the interim president, like you rightly mentioned. But what would you say, is the way forward?
Well, maybe he still have a strong support in the military. Himself being a former military personnel, he might have a strong support in the military, and so that's why the military has moved fast to install the son. But of course, that is against constitutionality. It's going to create a whole lot of squabble, because the Speaker of Parliament, as a matter of constitutionality, was supposed to be in the nest, since they don't have a vice president, which I don't think they do. Deby has run the country as a personal state, and so anybody installing, so just like what happened in Kabila's Democratic Republic of Congo when he was assassinated, and rather than the Speaker of Parliament becoming the president, they installed his son, Kabila Jr. Also, what's happened in Congo when his son was also installed. Also, what happened in Togo when Nasengbe's son was installed. These are part of stronghold of the military in African politics, undermining democratic structures. Because most of these leaders, they have strong support in the military, in their various military. They've held their military as personal estates. So their allegiance is to these leaders rather than to the country. So that move, for me, is going to create more political squabble, because there's going to certainly be a resistance. It's not a military government, it's a democratic government. And the son has no democratic structure to assume power. So the people of Chad, it's going to throw them into a more confusion that might need their colonial master, France, maybe to come in and to see how they can mediate it.
Well, all right, France says it is urging a quick return to civilian rule, and even the military has said they've scheduled elections for 18 months from now. We'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out. But thank you so much, Alastair Wilcox, African Affairs Analyst. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks for having me. It's always my pleasure, anytime. Thank you.
In the Central African Republic, vaccination campaign for United Nations peacekeepers has begun. UN personnel in the front line are among priority groups for COVID-19 vaccination for their proximity to the vulnerable population they help protect in the line of duty. Deputy Force Commander of MINUSCA, General Paulo Emmanuel, was the first staff to receive the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. MINUSCA, the UN mission in CAR, became the first mission in the Department of Peacekeeping Operations to receive COVID-19 vaccines. This first batch will be used to vaccinate MINUSCA personnel, including peacekeepers, UN agencies and international organizations, national staff and their families.
It is very important for us because we cannot continue to save people if we are not safe. Self-preservation is best of all, and I think we will be in a better position to protect others when we are in good health. And I think I want to encourage all the international staff to allay their fears and to come forward and take this vaccination.
The impact of climate change is increasingly felt by Africa's small-scale farmers who are battling the ravages of drought, floods and desert locusts. However, Pula, a 5-year-old Kenyan insurance technology startup, is offering coverage to help small-scale farmers manage the risks of extreme weather conditions.
When Kenyan farmer Wakil Munyalo's crop of lentils shrank by 3/4 last year because of unusual low rainfall, disaster was averted thanks to a simple remedy that was previously unavailable to most African farmers: insurance. Following a year of unusual low rainfall, Munyalo, a 38-year-old mother of 3 in Kenya, had taken out an insurance policy with Kenyan startup Pula, which aims to reach a vast untapped pool of African farmers grappling with new disruptions linked to climate change. Munyalo made a claim on her Pula policy and received a compensation payment of 12,000 Kenyan shillings, approximately $110. That meant she could afford school fees for her youngest son. Without the payment, he would have had to drop out.
The weather patterns have really changed lately, especially rainfall. In the past, the rains were enough to produce a good harvest. The rains come and disappear for about 3 weeks. Then, with the prevailing hot conditions, the crops just wither and die.
Farming is the biggest contributor to many African nations' economic output, including Kenya, where 600,000 farmers have taken out policies with Pula in the 6 years since it's launched. Key to the firm's success is affordability. Farmers can insure their crop with Pula for as little as $5 to $10.
We are trying to help them by distributing insurance products that will enable them to fight advanced climatic changes, things to do with rainfall, whether it's excess rainfall which causes the flooding and hailstorms, whether it's less rainfall which causes drought and causes plant loss, things to do with desert locusts, which of late has been a nuisance to farmers and bringing a lot of loss to farmers, also covering things to do with anything that is a natural calamity that's likely to affect the farmer.
Because of climate change, farmers are having to contend with unpredictable rain patterns, frequent droughts, and even the emergence of new pests and diseases.
Key for us is to one, as I said, achieve diversification, demonstrate that this is actually something we can do at a global scale, to enable us to reach our goal of reaching at least 30 million farmers in the next 2 to 3 years, spread across the 3 continents, Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
Across Africa, small-scale farmers who collectively are crucial to feeding the continent are struggling to cope with the impact of climate change on weather pattern and the land on which they depend. Those challenges, combined with the spread of mobile phone technology, have created the conditions for Pula's rapid growth. Looking beyond Kenya, the company has also signed up 4.6 million farmers in Nigeria, Zambia, Ethiopia, and other African countries.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.